Welcome to the next chapter, brought to you by Contractor Academy. I'm Bill Kennard with Grandy & Associates.
And I'm Glenn Herman with Creative Business Services.
Glenn, it's great to be back here with you again.
It is.
I enjoy these things. So as we get started here with this session, one of the things that we want to remind you about again today is that, again, we've got the chat or the Q&A window in front of us. As we go through the material today, we wind up with a number of questions. In the last 2 months, we've certainly seen a number of questions that come in. If you've got questions for us during the session, feel free to go ahead and enter them in on the Q&A tab. Don't use the chat tab, the chat window, because we don't see that one. But the Q&A tab, you can go ahead and enter it in there, and we will see those. We can address them in real time for you as we run through this thing. Now, Glenn, having said that, after last month's webinar, we ended up with a question afterwards. One of the things, if you recall, we talked about the timing of that sale process. And there were a couple of questions about, you said something, I think it was 90 days or 60 days, something in that time frame.
I think I confused things a little bit in the spirit of clarification. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about the closing time frame. That is typically 60 to 90 days, but the sales cycle can actually go as long as, it could go much longer than that. It could go 8 to 10 months or a year. We've had situations where from the time we engaged with a prospective buyer to the time we closed has been, in that 10-month time frame. So, but
so
not
you're
typical.
When you're talking about closing, you're talking about from the time we have an agreement in place.
From that time, it's typically, once we have an agreement or a letter of intent, typically 60 to 90 days would be typical.
Okay, got it. So we just wanted to clarify that point a little bit as we jumped in and got started here with the material today. So again, if you have questions on those, we like to get those in. So go ahead and send them to us. Put them in the Q&A window, and we can deal with those as they come in. So today's topic that we're going to be talking about is certainly succession driven, right? And so we've got the action steps that we've used in the past. We've got those here. Today we're really dealing with action step 5, being delegation. Now, as we jump into that, and just for your reference, Stacy's going to share in the chat window. She'll share again the 10 action steps that we've kind of been going over in this series, as well as the timelines. Just so again, it hasn't changed from last month, but just to make sure that you have it if we have anybody who's new. Now, we've got in there a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. And action step 5, delegation, if you're working on a 3-year plan, it really comes in at the end of year 1. Right? If you're working on a 5-year plan, shows up really at the beginning of year 3. Now, please know that as we lay out these timelines, we are not saying that that's when you should start working on that particular step. We're saying that's the latest you should be starting to work on that step, because it takes time. Some of these things, you said, once you get engaged, you're looking at maybe up to a year, right? 10 months. But quite frankly, to get your business in the position where it needs to be for that transition process to really even start engaging, it takes a little bit of time, and we need to have the rest of the team there. So, again, this timeline, those are really the latest steps that you should get them there, that you should be starting to work on that. So really the focus today is again, talking about delegation. And really, today, Glenn, wouldn't you agree that this topic here today, we're really looking more at preparing the company to get ready to talk to you?
Yeah, it's a structure. I always talk about structuring in my business ventures. I talk about structuring for growth. Mm-hmm. It's structuring for sale is the same thing, and delegation is a huge part of that.
Oh, absolutely, without a question of a doubt. Really that topic, delegation, right? How am I preparing for somebody else to lead in the future? And that takes more than just getting that one individual ready. It really comes down to getting the whole team ready, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Right, and so that becomes a little bit of a question. I love this quote that a friend of mine had come up at one point. The day Moses wanted to die, God says you better delegate. Right, so somebody still has to keep leading at that point in time. And so, as we've done in the past, we come up with 2 questions that you need to focus on. Really in terms of each of these focus areas, right? So the first one is delegation. Have I practiced delegation in my development of other leaders within my company? And then second is the, under development, have I empowered my successor to take over operational authority? Now, let's just real briefly, we'll talk about that because we're going to come back to that certainly in one of the later steps of delegation. But how important is it for, in that purchase process, especially if, because again, there's the two different camps, right? One is somebody within the company who's going to take over. The second one is somebody from outside the company who's going to buy that and take over. How important is it to really have started to turn over some of the operational functionality to that next person? And I think that might apply a little bit more toward if it's somebody inside the company buying it.
I think there's definitely an argument for both, depending on which camp. It's both very important. From the standpoint of if you're training a successor, that delegation, having somebody that can accept, tasks, you're gonna be able to identify if there's, if you've done what we talked about last time with personality profiling and you understand, what kind of activity and behaviors to expect from somebody, it gives you an opportunity to hone that. So the sooner that you're able to delegate, that lets you work more on that business for that succession to make sure that the transition is successful internally. From an external standpoint, we talked about it last month. Prospective buyers, external prospective buyers, are looking at being able to work on a business and less in it. So having that opportunity to delegate is huge. I have several situations now where I have, typically, I have more buyers than sellers. Right now, I have one particular gentleman. He's looking for companies. He's really hungry for companies, but he doesn't necessarily feel like he wants to work at that company 50 hours a week. Yeah. He wants to buy something that he can spend time on, and and we'll talk about that.
But the company should be able to run by itself.
Absolutely.
To a degree. So that is a case. You're right, where starting to turn over a little bit of that operational authority to, even if you're not selling the company to this individual, then being able to run the company is pretty important in that case.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, good. One of the things that we also take a look at is, when we're looking at delegation, is how do I do with delegation, right? I tend to think I'm pretty good at it, right? We've been running this company for a long time, and it's kind of humming along, and one of the things that we do, this is a quick exercise, you can see the worksheet here, that we use in a number of our workshops. And the question is, how are you at delegating? Because sometimes we don't really recognize that. And so it's a down and dirty way of checking it, right? It's 10 simple questions, right? And as I look at those questions, and Stace, if I can get you to put that back on full screen for 1 second for me, right? If you look at it, might be kind of tough to see some of these, but if you look at some of the questions, right? Are there always emergencies popping up, or are you stuck dealing with minutia in terms of projects and things like that? So at that point, those are questions that if we go through and answer them, and it's a simple yes/no answer, right? Is this the case within my company? If you go through this thing and answer it honestly, it's pretty easy to say, no, I don't, right? But if you go through this and you have 4 or more yeses on this list, odds are you've got a problem with delegation. It's in the chat box. Okay, so we just shared this worksheet in the chat box for you. So you've got it, you can download it, utilize it. Now, if you go through it and you're not quite sure on some of these, if you really want an exercise, Glenn, what would you think about this? Give this to 2 or 3 of your key people within your company and let them answer it about you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to do that, but no, I think there's value. Leaders have to identify their unresolved opportunities as well. You have to, know your strengths, but know your weaknesses too, and your opportunities. Delegation, when it's not done well, is a culture killer.
Oh, absolutely.
We see that. Micromanagers, we've all probably worked with or for somebody that's a micromanager, and it's just taxing culturally.
So you just brought up 2 things, right? That spurred a question for me. The first one was, knowing your weaknesses. Last month, you talked about one of the things that you want to do within a company is to do that SWOT analysis, right? So strengths, weaknesses,
opportunities, and threats.
right? And what are those areas? And so if you're not good as a current leader in your company at delegating and you haven't developed other leaders, that's a big strike in the weakness column, isn't it?
Yeah, and potentially a threat as well, because
yeah.
when employees aren't satisfied, what do?
They're going to leave.
How do a lot of contracting companies start?
Right. I used to work for somebody else, and now I can do it better and make more money myself.
And I got sick of this or that, and it's usually a culturally oriented reason in most cases.
No question. So then we come back to the second one, right, which is culture, right? So that not delegating properly is a weakness within your company that can put you at risk. But the second one is that culture. And so it's interesting. We've been doing a series of posts out on our Facebook page recently about 10 keys to delegation. And so this kind of dovetails in nicely with it. And the one that posted, I think, yesterday or today was, as the leader of the company, you set the tone for your entire team. Right? I mean, so as the leader of the company, if you're hustling, if you're making things happen, then at that point the chances are the team is going to hustle a little bit more, right? If you're slow, if you're dogging it, they're going to dog it, right? And all of that goes into the culture of the company because, again, you have a culture in your company. The question is it a good culture or a bad culture?
Yeah, and I think culture, and it's kind of a little sideline here, but I think culture, confidence, and competency always kind of dovetail one another. If you have a good delegation process that's thought out in advance, it becomes second nature. It builds confidence and it builds competence as well.
I agree. And I don't know that it's so much of a rabbit trail because I firmly believe that the culture of your company, you have to have a sound culture that the employees are happy before you can really effectively delegate to other people. Right? Because if we've got a lousy culture, well, it makes it awfully hard to start delegating to other individuals. And so that winds up becoming a bit of an issue. So so that's just one of those areas that we look at. So again, I look at, this is a tool for you to kind of just evaluate yourself. And again, if you really want to be serious about it, consider giving it to somebody else within the company that you trust. Because sometimes we have blind spots. I know I don't, right? But you might, Glenn. Right? So,
no, not me.
People tend to have some, blind spot, and we don't see some of our own weaknesses. And so by letting somebody else judge us, if we really want to eliminate some of those problem areas, that can be an area to, I say I don't have a problem with delegation, and if everybody else around me agrees with me, well, then I probably don't. So just a tool that you can use for that. Now, there's a process. So, as we jump into this first one, right, and before we get to the first level, one of the things that I want to question you on, Glenn, is, a lot of company owners say that they basically they run their business by gut feel. How successful are you at selling gut feel?
That's very difficult to sell. That falls into, you're in dangerous territory if that's what you're selling. And because you're not, there's no process, there's no system in place when you're running by your gut.
Yeah. So, one of the things I'll challenge some of our clients with as we're working with them is, can you teach gut feel?
No.
So you're right. Let me back up a step, right? So how did you learn gut feel? Odds are, in some cases, how did I learn gut feel? 35 years ago, when I went into this for myself, I did something on a job that was a real, boneheaded move, right? It cost me a fortune, and I put some practice in place so that would never happen again, right? And I repeated that practice. And if you repeat something long enough, it becomes a habit. You do a habit long enough, you don't even think about it, it just becomes gut feel, right? I don't even think about it being a habit anymore. It just is what it is. So the challenge is, how do I take that 35 years of experience and boil it down here into a couple of years? Right? Because we really have to get that next leader functioning and thinking and responding the same way I do.
Yeah. Process. I think
Process.
the process of how you, and we'll talk about that in a minute here, but just the levels of delegation are important because it gives you an opportunity to evaluate. And we talked about I think we have an upcoming slide here that's going to be pretty telling, and I think everybody's going to. I call it doing the drinking bird. Everybody's going to be going, yeah, that's right, that's right. But I like that. Having steps to delegation, I think there's different levels.
Absolutely,
right? For sure.
And so that very first level of delegation, I mean, we think about it at the very beginning, really comes down to do exactly what I've asked you to do. Right? Don't deviate from my instructions. I've already researched the options. I know what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Really, and that's what, I think you call that earlier, go for a level delegation, right? Just, go for this, go for that, just make it happen, right? So, I mean, now in this one, I should be able to see pretty quickly whether you have what it takes or not, right? I mean, if you can't carry out a simple task, then you and I both have a problem, right? So we should get past this very, very quickly, right? If we get stuck on level 1, we have a whole nother issue. So that really brings us to level 2. Right, and level 2 basically says, research the topic and report back to me, right? And then we can talk about it, and I'll make a decision to tell you what I want you to do, right? So how, do you have some thoughts as far as how that might look, or an example of something like that?
Well, and I think back, I'm an ex-military guy, so when I look at, this is part of leadership development. When you have an emerging leader, or you have somebody that has the potential gut feel, where you say this person might have it. I'm not a gut feel guy. I think you have to really prove these things out. The first thing you do, step level 1, when we're talking about level 1, don't deviate from my instructions, go for the principle. You're really looking at followership. Is this person a good, does this person take direction well? If you don't take direction well, you can't give direction well. And, level 2 research and report back, that's going to give you some ideas on what's this person's intuition? What are the things that they're looking at? Are they looking at the same things that I'm looking at? And is it supportive of what we're trying to accomplish as a company? So that's I think that's what would be level 2 when you're looking at, I in terms of again looking back at my military experience, research something and get back to me. That kind of is a precursor to doing a decision. I'm saying, okay, I want you to go gather the information and bring it back, but I'll still make the decision.
Right.
But you're taking some of that off my plate. So that's kind of.
And I think at that point, as we're discussing it, we'll talk about it. I can kind of give you some guidance, right? A little bit of insight into what's going on in here and why I like this idea, I don't like that idea. This is going to be problematic for us, some of that stuff. And I can share some of that with you and start to grow that leadership bud that's in there somewhere, right? And so, I know we've certainly done that around here in terms of, well, hey, I just, go out and do some research and find a venue for an event, right? We're itching to get back in person and do things, one-on-one. And so, we're looking to do an event at a couple of different cities, just find a couple of venues that we might be able to do that at, right? Come back and just fill us in, right? That's a level 2. So at this point, and again, this is kind of an ongoing thing. You're not going to sit down and have a conversation with one person once on one issue and think that they've got level 2 down, right? That'll take a little bit of time. So then we move to level 3, right? So we'll start spending a little bit more time on some of these. And level 3 kind of is getting back to what you were just alluding to, right? So research the topic, outline the options, and make a recommendation for me, right? And, give me the pros and cons of each one. Tell me what you think we should do, and if I agree with you, then I'll authorize you to move forward with it. Now, this one really does take it a step farther, doesn't it?
It does.
So what's the advantage of having them go through the work, go through the exercise, and make a recommendation?
Well, again, you're looking at those behaviors, and you're looking at the activity that's generated from an instruction or a delegated task. So what you're really trying to do is, in level 3, again, looking at the military, I would give my subordinates, I'd say, we call this a decision brief, where I want you to go, here's a problem that I have, or task, whatever, here are the conditions, and here's the standard that I want to meet. Go out and find the answers for me, and then tell me, bullet point number 2, tell me what you think we should do, and why. I think, and why.
That's important.
Because then I can make an informed decision, but I'm trusting you enough to let you go find the big pictures on what we should potentially do, and then I'll make a decision based on that.
Sure.
So,
and I think back to not all that long ago, we had this exact scenario again here, right? So, I basically had one of our team members here, operations manager at that point. We were looking at replacing our phone system. And now, again, the structure of our company is such that there's a core of people who are here in this office that work here, but the majority of our team is someplace else. They work remotely. Because in a lot of cases they're training in person, and so what changes is what airport they drive to get to work that day. And so that changes our communication level a little bit. And so he came back to me, and he had researched 3 different, which I thought was good, right? He researched 3 different companies, so we had some various options there. And again, kind of broke down what he saw as the pros and cons to each and gave me a recommendation. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with that. And the reason I didn't agree with his choice is because he was missing some of those key elements. Right? And part of it was, and what I missed on that one was the why. Why did you choose this decision, this particular one? And as we started talking about it, I kind of worked the why out of him. And he liked the features. He's an individual who worked inside the office as part of the core group that was here. His particular option really would not have worked well for the team that was outside the office.
And I think that's a key point, because the spirit of delegation is collaboration. And when you have, when you're at level 3, now you can bring other people in. You're not occupying as much time with the total team, but you can have your team together to make collaborative decisions on, 3 areas,
right?
Potentially. So.
And so, in this particular case, we just simply said, look, that one's not going to work. Right, because it's going to create problems for the crew who are outside. I mean, we need to be able to transfer calls to those individuals, even if they're across the country, and it needs to be integrated with their cell phones and things like that. And so we ended up, it gave me the opportunity, right? So the 3rd bullet point here is basically, if you agree with the decision, I'll authorize you to move forward. The unspoken part of that's not printed there is, if you disagree, right, I can now tell you, make a different choice and explain my rationale why. Right, so a little bit of that, need you to start looking a little bit more big picture. How does it affect other people here on the team? How is it going to work with us? What are some of the benefits? And ultimately, what we chose was a little bit more expensive, but it gave us the tools that we needed. And so that's where that level 3 really, in my mind, becomes a pivotal point in that teaching delegation process.
Absolutely.
Right, because that's where you start to learn, how do they think, what are they doing, how are they viewing what we're doing, that sort of thing. So that becomes important. So then we go to level 4, right? Now level 4 starts to get fun, right? Level 4 basically says, make a decision, just let me know what you did, right? I trust you to do the research, I trust you to make the best decision for the company, and I trust you to keep me in the loop, right? I just don't want to be surprised. Now, what do you think, what's your opinion, what do you think can start to happen within a company, within that leadership role when we get to this point?
I was just thinking about that. It's going to give that owner some autonomy. Maybe I would identify that in looking at a business. When I look at a prospective seller, I'm going to look at their business and I'm going to say, one of the questions I have is, how often do you leave the business and for how long? If I can identify
I leave the business at 10 o'clock every night, and I'm back by 5 o'clock every morning.
Right, and do you take vacation? That's another big one.
Take what?
Take a vacation, exactly.
Right.
I know. But, do you take a vacation? When you're at level 4, you're going to be at a position where you can probably take 1 to 3 weeks away from your business without too many problems, maybe even 30 days, because you're being kept in the loop. Now, you have to have a very high level of trust to be able to leave for an extended period of time. If you're looking at, 3 to 4 weeks, that's a long time to leave a business.
Sure.
That's like leaving your newborn for, a few hours. Well, it's going to be, maybe if they're sleeping, but 3 to 4 hours or 3 to 4 weeks is a long time. So, but that's a kind of a barometer for where is this business insofar as their ability to delegate and structure. Is their company structured?
Because there again, in order for so this really becomes, I said 3 was kind of pivotal within an individual. This, I think, becomes pivotal within the company.
Oh, for sure.
Right, because that idea, think about it for a moment. If you want to challenge your company and really, test your systems and test the processes that you have in place, plan on being out of the office for 3 to 4 weeks at one shot. Right? Now, some of you, right, when you said that a minute ago, right, I heard a whole bunch of gasps out there, right? But here's the thing. Think about it. If the company can function without you for 3 to 4 weeks,
healthy.
It's healthy, without a question of a doubt. Now, a lot of us, we kind of panic going, well, if I leave, nothing happens. Well, that in itself is a problem, right? Because now you can't leave. You can't even leave if they sell it because nothing's going to happen. And so that's really something that, again, those buyers are looking for, is that level of autonomy.
Oh, and they'll ask those questions. How often does the owner take vacation? How often are they there? How many hours do they put in? It's a common question. If you saw us buying this company, how many hours would you expect us to have to be involved directly working in the business? On a weekly basis. That's a common question.
Sure.
A common question.
So one of the things you can do to work toward that end, right? As you're working with this individual, you get them at level 4 in this area. Think about it. Every time you go back, you go to a conference, you're gone for the day, right? You come back, what didn't work? Well, if it didn't work, that tells me there's a process that's broken, isn't there? Right? And so we fix that process.
Yeah.
Okay, now when they're gone for 2 or 3 days, come back, what didn't work? Okay, we just found another broken process, right? So let's fix that one. So when A happens, we do B every time. We know how to respond when a problem comes up each and every time. And I had a friend of mine, Jay Owen at Business Builders down in St. Augustine, Florida, had challenged me at one point. He said, could you leave your company for 30 days? He said, leave your company for 30 days. What do you have to do to prep the company to get it ready to be gone for 30, and not just gone, right? Because, I know how many of us work, right? We're gone, but we're really not gone, right? Gone, out of communication, right? And so I actually started, now I couldn't do 30 days right out of the gate, right? So I said 2 weeks. Let's do 2 weeks. We're going to be, and told my team, look, the only way you contact me is if somebody died or we're in threat of going out of business. One or the other, right? Other than that, I'm not available.
And I always say, if you can't, you can call me. I'm on vacation, because when I'm on vacation, I'm checked out. I'm like, it's going to be, here's my number. You feel free to call me, but only call me if you were willing to drive to where I am. If you can't reach me, otherwise it's not that important.
Right.
So.
Right. And so, one of the things is, again, getting those processes in place and making them happen. And again, we saw so much growth just, internally within our company, the first time we did that. Now, again, it can be a challenge, right? And quite frankly, it was as much of a challenge for me in terms of, number one, not only recognizing it, but, my team comes to me and say, okay, here, you're the bottleneck, Bill. Right, so you got to do something here, and so I certainly hear that one. The other one is when I'm gone. Microsoft now has this. What do they call it? Microsoft Viva. Every morning I get an email just with my daily schedule from my Outlook system. And last week I saw a post that gave me some stats throughout the month of January, and it said every time I received a business email outside of business hours, I typically responded in less than 30 minutes. I'm sick. Right?
Most of us are.
Right? Because again, you got to let that go to a degree, right? So what are the processes, right? And for me, that made me look back at, okay, I got to go back and review that because something's not right. There's a piece here that we're missing if I'm spending that much of my time away from outside of business hours, still responding that quickly. So we need to work on that one. I'm still a work in progress, as we all are. So that's level 4, right? Make a decision. I just don't want to be surprised. I've got a real good example of this one that came up not all that long ago. As we, in fact, it was last winter. We had an in-person venue event that we were doing, and of course, when we do those venues as trainers, we don't bring all of our materials with us, right? So we typically have that shipped to the site. There's student manuals and a lot of other stuff that goes with it. Well, I'm traveling out there. I'm en route, and the office calls me and said, "Bill, snowstorm held up shipping. Your stuff's not going to make it in time." Well, it's kind of tough to run a workshop event with no materials. And basically said, what I did is made a decision. We had another complete set shipped to arrive on site by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Right now, it's expensive to do that. Right? I mean, seldom, when you're shipping stuff all the way across the country and it's several cases of materials, it gets very expensive. But it was the right decision. Right, because, so that way I knew I could already be preparing when I got there. Okay, I got no material. It's all going to arrive at 8 o'clock. I could be talking to the receiving, at the venue to make sure we got the stuff in. And again, at least I can still continue to function and the company still looks good. Right. So, again, just make a decision. I just don't want to be surprised when I get there. So, all right. So that's level 4. I said there's 5 levels, right? So there's one more level. Level 5 basically says there's no need to report back to me. Make whatever decision you think is best. You don't have to report back. I trust you completely. And really, I know that you're going to follow through. I know, you've got my full support. I trust you to run the company. Now we've got a huge gold nugget that we're hanging on to, don't we?
It's hard to get to that point. Subordinate leaders are going to want to stay in that level 4. That's a comfort zone. Because that comfort zone, you don't want to be surprised in level 4, but we're giving you some autonomy. I trust you to do it, make a good decision, but they're still probably going to tell you what they did. And when you get past that, when you get to that, I always call it the competent confident is something that I call it. When you have that competent confident there, that feels, that autonomy, that's leadership. And that now that emergent leader is a leader. That person is going to be able to move forward, and now you can talk about like strategy and vision and things way over and above maybe that level 3 or 4 person.
Sure.
Now you can start having them as part of those conversations so that you can shape the direction of your company without actively working
in the company.
it.
Right. So really, there are a couple of points here at this level 5 is that really when we hit level 5 delegation, that's where you've really built a business that can run on its own. Right, it can function without you. So then you can spend more time focusing on vision and where do we want to go and how are we going to get there. You can now hand off a concept to your team and let them run with it. And really all the details that are going to be required to make that concept, bring it to fruition are kind of implied, right? Here's what we're looking at doing, make it happen. And that really starts to, because if I get to that point, one of the challenges, all right, so let me back up one step, right? So you said, some level leaders hesitate to go from level 4 to level 5, right? And part of that, do you think gets down to they're not spending their money, right? They're spending your money. And so that's why I still want to kind of keep you in the loop. I want to let you know what's going on.
Yeah, it may be part of that. Most of the time, in my opinion, it's the leader. It's whoever's delegating. It's probably them.
Hasn't quite let go yet.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to do.
It is.
It is hard to do. And it's still that newborn in the crib.
Right.
Even though it's 30 years old, that's still your baby. You're still going to watch out for it.
Right.
And that's the most difficult thing.
And let's be clear here as well. We're not saying that you need to completely be hands off and let your company do it. No, you're still involved in it, right? But at a much higher level, at the conceptual level and the vision and where are we going and and really that part of the company itself is what we're looking to do. But now the company can totally function. And if you need to step away and go handle something or be gone for a month, the company's not going to miss a beat at that point.
No.
And that company becomes much easier to find a buyer for.
It really is. It
And-
really,
and
yeah.
what does it do to the value?
Oh, the value's increased tremendously because now you have a team, you have a system, you have your company isn't just your company isn't just a bunch of processes and systems. Your company is a process and a system. It's its own process.
Sure.
This is how we do it. At that point, you're documenting your processes, which you should be doing from the start. But
Right.
now you're looking at those documents and those flows and how do we do things and saying, well, now you can empower people because you have that machine humming. Now it's a money machine.
Right.
And you have it humming. Now you can affect change very quickly because everybody's understands how we do business and we
Sure.
have this process. And where it may not increase, it does increase value. But even if it didn't, your marketability is so much greater because now you're open to a universe of other types of buyers, whether it be private equity or large competitors looking to grow market share.
Sure.
And some businesses out there who may not be considering selling their businesses, this is where you start looking at when you're in the market to purchase a business. You look at those things and say, well, this is a viable option. I don't have to be there all the time, but hey, I can pick up a ton of market share at almost no cost.
Right.
That difference in what I would have to spend in time in terms of the value of that, I can pay a little bit more
Sure.
potentially. So
Good. Excellent. Now, there's also let me ask this question, right? Because we're going to hit a couple of problem areas that we stumbled into with this as well. But if a person isn't necessarily at level 5 in everything they do, right? Would you agree with that?
oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, there may be an area of their job or what they do that they're a level 5. I can let them run. I don't need to deal with it. But they might be at a level 3 in another area. Right. So, a person will tend not to be, when you look at this delegation process, it's not necessarily an all or nothing, right? They may be, like I said, completely proficient, level 5 in one area, and in another area, you're still grooming them. You're still having them do the research and, give you a recommendation and tell you why. And, you're still grooming them there, right? So it's a process. And again, that's why it takes time to make this stuff happen.
And I think that's what makes people want to stay in a business too, is they're evolving.
Sure.
You're growing. Why are you in a business? Oh, I get paid X amount. That's not why people, that's one small factor. I also tell people it's not always about price. I'm blessed with an opportunity to chair a committee that runs a child development center for my church. And, those folks don't make a lot of money.
Right.
But they're not looking for that.
They have
Everybody's
passion
motivated.
too, don't they?
Yeah, everybody's motivated in a little different way. And when you're helping people grow professionally, typically your business is going to grow, and then you can help them grow financially.
Right.
But if you're helping them grow professionally and socially, and you're developing them as a leader through delegation, the key in looking at that too is you're going to have people that are a level 2 or a level 3, and that's good to know. It's good to know who your leaders aren't as much as it is to know who your leaders are.
That's a good point, right? And some of the assessment stuff we talked about last time can give you an inkling to it, right? But having an ability and using it are two different things, right? So actually seeing them applying it, really becomes important. Can you think of an example? And I know it happens. I've been fortunate that it hasn't happened much to me, but it has, where a user may get up to a level 4, and then for whatever reason they slip back to a level 3.
Again, I think it's usually the leader. If that happens, it's usually because somebody made a mistake, in my experience. And I'm guilty of this too, where I've had, people work for me and they made a mistake and now it's like, I can't trust them. Or I don't believe in them as much.
Yep.
That's on me though. Why is that? Why do I feel that way? Usually, I'm an I, me, we guy. If something really bad happened, I probably did something. It was me. If it was something that was, it's okay. It might be me, or it might be we could do better. But if it's something great, you did a great job. And so I really think it's usually the leader, but not all. I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes people, again, we talked about this a while back. We can control behaviors. We can't control attitudes. And if attitudes slip, sometimes it pulls behavior back. But I think you really have to understand, if you have the process and you understand what those levels of delegation are, it's much easier to identify those where that's coming from.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting. One of the things that we found here within in-house is that COVID again has such an impact on this to a degree, in that we had processes and we were just a well-oiled machine before COVID. Right? I mean, we had all the trainers were out and things were happening, and then for us, the world kind of turned upside down, right? Literally, right? Since we here, for the most part, made a living by getting on airplanes and getting together with groups of people, the faucet shut off. And so we start doing things virtually. And we really got pretty proficient at running these virtual events. Well, now we're going back to live events, and suddenly things are falling through the cracks a little bit, right? And so part of that is, and we just had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, is, okay, we have to go back, review the processes that we had before, because we're not using them, right? So let's go back and revisit them to make sure that we still have that same proficiency.
Yeah, and it's not always cause and effect. I guess I didn't mean to, when I say it's the leader, I don't mean that it's the leader's fault, but it's the leader's responsibility to be able to identify that, because things do happen. COVID happens.
Yeah.
It could be a personal issue with somebody, but being able to understanding the levels of delegation, when you see that and you identify that, it's so much easier to say, okay, what happened here?
Right.
Last time we were here, now we're here. Is there something going on?
So that does bring a couple of other items, right? So as you look at this and evaluate, are they level 3, are they level 4, are they level 5, is that idea of, as they made their decisions, right, did they think about really the big picture, right? Did they think about how did the players that were involved feel as a result of it? Were the people and the problems handled correctly, right? Were the prices, and the schedules handled properly, right? All those things can make or break the decision as we move forward. Did they consider the downsides? What were the negative impacts of a decision they were making? And were the financial considerations for profit and cash flow within the company considered? Because again, they make a bad decision. You hand that off to somebody else to make a decision, and it's a bad decision, it still impacts your cash flow, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Very expensive. It can be very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so, that's one of those things to just kind of look at that piece of the puzzle. Now, the other one is, really testing at really all levels. Right. But even if they're at level 5, right, you need to do some tests and verification. But, I certainly believe that at all levels, we need to be testing them. As they start growing, maybe they hit level 3, right? Give them a small project and see how they handle it. Right, and then stop and go back and see what they did. Right, how do they respond to it? Did they answer those? Consider everything involved. Number 2 here, love that one. Right, inspect what you expect. Right, and what did you tell me earlier, Glenn?
Well,
right.
you don't get what you expect.
You never get what you expect.
You get what you inspect.
Right. Exactly.
And it's so important when you're, and it's the frequency of inspection. Inspecting somebody. I used to run an HVAC company. And one of the tasks was, let's get out the door quicker. How do we do that? Well, we had a set policy that we're going to have everything put out for the next morning, the night before. It was a task given to one person. I made the mistake of not checking to make sure that was being done after. I did it for the first few times, but then a week later, I didn't check it as often. And pretty soon, 3-4 weeks later, it wasn't happening. So you get what you inspect, not what you expect, but have a time and be fair about it. Don't, surprise inspections typically don't work. You have to have that here, the understanding that when this gets done, I'm going to check on it to make sure that it was done in a way. So there's no why are you checking up on me? Are you micromanaging me? No, I'm just doing this because I want to make sure. And then that frequency can change over time.
So we have had a number of examples with company owners where they weren't inspecting. Right, and they had issues with non-billable time, and the profitability was in the hole, and they're going over on jobs, and in fact, so one of the things, in fact, Tom Grandy, our company's founder, was one of those. Right, so before he started Grandy and Associates, he was the general manager to a home improvement type company. They did windows, doors, insulation, siding, that kind of thing, and they basically had decided that they were going to dispatch all of their guys to the job in the morning, All right, so that way I don't start paying them until they arrive at the job, versus if they come into the office, I got to start paying them when they come into the office. And so, and again, looking at it, Tom's going, okay, it can absolutely work, but he's telling Paul, his foreman, you have to not micromanage. You need to manage this process, right, and make sure you pay attention to it. And the first couple of weeks, lost time disappeared. It was awesome. And then pretty soon, Tom's getting phone calls in the office from consumers or customers going, wait a minute, your guys, we're supposed to be here at 7 o'clock. I'd like to at least talk to them before I leave for work. It's 7:30 and they're not here yet, right? Or I thought they were going to take a 30-minute lunch. I mean, it's been an hour and they're not back yet. Or I thought they were going to work till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They're gone already, right? And so when Tom starts talking to his foreman, he goes, I know this will work. He said, I check on every single job. I said, I set aside between 9:30 and 11 every day to check on every job we got going. Well, when were his guys working? Between 9:30 and 11 every day, right? And so he just, at that point, just started changing it up. He might be on a job at the start of the day, he might be midday, he might be at the end of the day, but just checking in. His guys never knew when they were going to show up. And suddenly, they were actually working a full day, right? And so that can be a piece of the puzzle there. You need to inspect what you expect. And even, again, all levels of delegation require verification, right? So Stacy is handling our operations and the financial side at this point now. Now, she handles all of it, and she's very good at it. But I'm still looking at the financials on a regular basis. I'm still looking at the reports. I'm still, do my monthly financial review and look at the numbers and where are they at. And, right, and we don't just do it myself. I'll sit down with her at times and do that as well. And so all levels require some bit of verification. So even at level 5, you're still involved in it.
Yeah, and now you're proving your concept. You're proving it.
Right. No question. So there's a couple of problem areas that we run into. One of those is micromanaging, right? And I mentioned that term in error a second ago, right? Corrected myself, but micromanaging is a problem, right? Micromanagers really, all micromanagers are leaders who don't delegate, right? They're control freaks, right? They don't want to let go. And the question I have to ask is, do you trust your people or don't you? Because so there again, that whole development process, that kind of comes back to what you were talking about a little while ago, right? If it slips back, you said it was usually the leaders.
The leader can be
cause it.
The leader can cause it. It's not typically, it's cause and effect somewhere, and you have to identify that as the leader. But it can very easily be the leader in some cases too. I've been that leader.
Right. Well, yeah, and if you always want to have your hands in it and you want to be controlling it, then quite frankly, you become the bottleneck in the company, don't you?
You do.
Because, if you're going to micromanage and you're going to control and second guess the decisions all of your team makes, what are the odds they're going to actually make a decision?
Slim.
Right? Odds are they're going to wait for you to make a decision, because if I make it, you're going to change it anyway.
Well, and that's a good point. A lot of the response that you get at the different levels is going to tell you what your abilities are as a delegator. You're going to understand that by the responses that you get. If somebody's continually asking you questions that you feel like they should already know the answer to, that might be an indication that you have to do some introspection too.
So, yeah, and that's a great point. So what might I do, right? How would I approach that conversation when it comes up next time, right? They're asking the questions again that they should know. How would you respond to them in that case?
You must have asked me that for a reason. And then I just let them answer. Because that's going to tell you a lot about yourself.
Sure.
That's how I usually handle it.
Yeah.
Because the question is, I know the answer to this is what then you might get well, this is what I think, and this is why. Now they've just elevated themselves to the next level.
Right. Absolutely. So then the follow up is, okay, so why didn't you make that decision? Right. Why do you have to come and verify it with me? Right. And part of that may be, well, you're the boss, or you're gonna change it, or I just want to verify. We haven't conveyed that trust or really given them that authority at that point, have we?
No, and it's a trust. You
really
go back
is.
to trust, number 3. It's so critical. And how do you develop trust? Well, you give somebody an opportunity,
and they prove themselves right.
To prove themselves right.
Yeah. So that also comes into the next item is authority, All right, so micromanaging, if you're doing that, that's a problem. You know, authority can be a problem as well, because as that next leader, starts to demonstrate, as their competency and their integrity are improving, you got to give them more authority, right? Yeah, and you really can't give responsibility without authority, because there's no better way to frustrate an individual. Right? A title doesn't make a leader. Just because I call you a service manager doesn't mean that you're the leader of that department. You have to basically demonstrate that, right? And so we look at that piece. So let's focus on those first three for a moment. What happens? And have you seen that in companies that you've worked with, where it's your responsibility, but you really don't have authority to make changes?
Yeah, I've seen that before. I've also seen where the accountability is there, but there's no authority. That's also a challenge. You have to have that. It's got to be a balance. Authority, I mean, that goes back to micromanagement. If you don't have that authority, that really hurts the overall team. And you can usually see that when you're looking at a company, if people are hesitant to talk to you when you go and introduce yourself, or or if they look, is somebody watching me talking to you? Or, if you can pick up on culture. I always try to pick up on culture.
Sure.
Recently, I went into a business, and I had one employee that just, as soon as I came in, gone. And I'm like, what are they doing? Well, they must have been at some point told, don't talk to people that come in or something. I don't know. And then there was one person that came over, and there was an interaction. But you can kind of pick up on some cues.
Sure.
But having the authority is so important. If you delegate a task and you don't give authority, then you take away motivation and sometimes purpose. And that's really the job of a leader. You provide purpose, motivation, and
Absolutely.
direction.
At one point, I was in a role at one point where I was a service manager, and I was tasked with managing the department, managing the profitability of the department, but I didn't have the authority to fire. Well, it kind of takes away a whole bunch of steam, right? I mean, okay, my problem is these three guys, right? They're not willing to change. There's nothing, we can. It's time to replace them, right? But I couldn't do that, and you're right. It totally demotivates that leader. There's no question about it. And then the last point I like to hear, delegation is not dumping, right? Delegation is not just giving people stuff that you don't like to do or want to do. Right, and so that's certainly one of those puzzle pieces that fall in there. So as we look at any other things that you'd want to add to these couple of areas,
the only thing I would say is, when you're talking about dumping, it's not. I mean, that's an option to dump something, but then dump it. Don't do it. Do it, delegate it, or dump it. If it's so menial that it doesn't need to be done, it shouldn't necessarily be done.
Well, that's a good point too. Looking at the things that you're doing, again, I always look at, and I think I may have brought it up in a previous session, is with everything that we're doing, every process that we're doing, my team should be able to answer one of two questions: what value does it bring to this company? What value does it bring to the customer? And if they can't answer one of those two questions, then why are we doing it? Right, because if it doesn't bring any value, then that would be something that we just flat out dump out of the process that we get rid of.
And that's something that a potential buyer of a company is going to look at. They're going to look at and see if they can identify anything from 30,000 feet, either from their experience in the market, if it's a competitor. They're going to look at that, and they're going to say, is there anything in that regard that maybe we can improve on? Maybe that's why, So if you don't leave enough of those chinks in your armor because you're organized and process driven, and you have a standard operating procedure in place for every area of your business, it makes it difficult for people to find reasons not to pay what you're asking.
Right. Yep. Good point. Very good. So, again, the two questions that we started out with today, right? Number one, delegation. Have you practiced delegation in your development of other leaders within your company? Remember, it takes time. And the second one is development. Have you empowered your successor to take operational authority? And again, even if it's not the person that's taking over, have you given them the authority to start to make some decisions, make changes, or changes, right? In some cases, and one of those things that I think is really falls on all of this, that overarches all of this, is and you touched on it a little bit earlier when you said that some people aren't motivated by money. Really, a lot of the new people joining your company I mean, they're not just looking for a job. It's not just the job. It's not just the wage. It's what is my path for improvement? What is my path for growth and moving up within this company itself? And they want to know that up front.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, again, if we're already set and the culture of our company is one that we're going to grow the people within the company and move them up, then at that point, if we can have those conversations with those new people coming in, the job becomes far more attractive.
It does, because people want to grow in any different number of ways, professionally, financially, personally. Everybody has a different motivator. We find millennials, I study the heck out of millennials because they've been very impactful on some business ventures that I've had. And millennials are very experiential, but the next generation, they're not as experiential, right. But they do want to have a path. They want that path.
They want to see the path for growth.
Yeah,
they will. In fact, most of that generation will take a job that pays a little bit less, that offers a path for growth,
right,
moving forward.
Absolutely. And if you have those, if they have that understanding, and these are things that you share with them. These are the levels of delegation. Here's where we want to get you to, but here's where you're at. This is a process that we have in our business to get through this. So here's what's going to happen over time. You're going to be given opportunities to do more. Right. And here's how we're going to do that. To have that process is so key.
It absolutely is, without a question of a doubt. Well, I continue to be amazed at how fast this time goes. It's unreal. So, again, we just want to bring out that, again, the next chapter is brought to you by Contractor Academy. There's a couple of different things that, other questions that came in after the last few sessions. Again, this gives you the ability to get training for your team for as little as $29 a month. And so, again, there's plans for volume if you've got more people on your team. But the nice part about this is this gives them the ability to do training on their time. And when I say their time, I mean within your schedule. Right, so it's not something they have to come to us for. It's available, it's online, it's virtual. Right now in Contractor Academy, there's something like 60 hours of training if you actually went through everything. We just put up 4 new lessons under basic HVAC electricity. I think those went up yesterday. That they're in place with a couple more coming. And again, a lot of different topics that we've got available. And one of the questions that came up again is, okay, but within this succession process in growing my team, where should I, what program should I take at each of these action step levels? And so Stacy will share in the chat box to you a document again that we put together, each of the action steps, and what are some of the programs that you can take that would help you best with that specific level. In growing your team, getting things to become more self-sufficient so you really are building something that you can sell in a big way. Now, again, we've got that, when you get in there, you can choose 3 different levels available. Level 1 is all the self-paced training. Level 2 is self-paced plus a nice discount on any of the live instructor-led training. And then level 3 gets you into utilizing our planning for profit software pricing platform as well. And so, again, we've got discounts on all 3 of those. You can access all of that at grandyassociates.com. So, Glenn, we come to the end of another hour. Now, I also want to just ask you real quick, because we had, right after we got done last time, there was somebody who called in and said, great, love the webinar again. Can I watch it again? Well, again, for those of you, we are recording it, right? So we will be sending that link out to you shortly. But this individual said, I really need evaluation on my company. What do I do next?
Contact me. You can reach me at the email listed there, gherman@cbs-global.com, or you can reach me at 920-432-1166. Ask for Glenn Herman, and we can get evaluation done in short order.
And really, Glenn focuses on really our sector of the world. And so, again, he's got the experience in there to be able to help you with that piece of the puzzle. And again, if you call me and say, Bill, I need a evaluation, I'm going to turn you over to Glenn, because it's not a process that just anybody can do. You need to have somebody who's certified. You need to have somebody who lives and breathes in that world. Otherwise, quite frankly, the valuation isn't really worth anything, is it?
Yeah, it's typically it's so much more than just the financials. There's goodwill. There's you have to understand the markets and the look at so many different factors, as we've talked about webinars. So look forward to talking to anybody.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. This, again, continues to be fun. Next month, we are looking at March 18th is what we have on the calendar right now. Will, again, be from noon to 1 o'clock Central Time. I will be sending out an email to everybody who registered. Again, we know that there's a chunk that that attend online. There's a chunk that actually watch the live streams, and there's others that want to see the recording. So as soon as we have the recording available, here in the next 24 hours, we'll send an email out to you. We'll also in there put links for the 3 handouts that Stacy shared with you in the chat box during this one, if you couldn't download it. And then we'll also give you a link to register for that next session as well. So again, even if you don't know if you can make it, go ahead and register. We'll send you the email with the recording link afterwards. Any final thoughts?
So much to think about today, but delegation starts with level 1. Finding that person. So.
Absolutely. With that, again, we appreciate your being tuning in to the next chapter here today. With that, we'll see you next month.